Okay, everyone should have just been notified that we have started recording this meeting for the monthly meeting for the Jeffries St Neighborhood Association this Monday, November 13th. As a reminder, this meeting is hosted on Zoom but is not searchable publicly. It can be found on our website, which is www.jeffriespoint.org. You are not required to keep your camera on. You may change your name as it appears on the display, and we will ask most people to submit their questions through the chat, so you are not required to be seen or identifiable through the recording. My name is Margaret Farmer, and I'm co-chair of the Jeffries St Neighborhood Association. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Huang. I'm the other co-chair, and I'll be doing slides tonight. Andrew?
I am Andrew Pike. I'm the treasurer, and I will be handling the chat this evening.
Right, no worries. Hey, I'm Josh Schmidt. I'm the secretary, and I'll be taking notes and posting the recording of this. Back to you, Margaret.
Thank you. Our vice chair, Carolina, unfortunately could not be here this evening, but we will look forward to seeing her at future meetings. A few announcements this evening. The Madaro Family Foundation is hosting their public Thanksgiving Day dinner at the Salesian Boys and Girls Club in Eastie on Thanksgiving Day between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. There is both a sit-down dinner available as well as takeout turkey dinners. Facebook has more information, or you can call the Madaro Family Foundation at 857-293-1465. This event is free and all are welcome to attend. They are both looking for people to attend and participate as well as volunteers. So feel free to participate in this great event. One of my other announcements seems to have moved. We'd like to congratulate the East Boston Soup Kitchen. They announced that they have recently completed some recent renovations. We congratulate them and thank them for their great work in the community, and we look forward to sharing more updates with you about what they have going on. On Saturday, November 4th, sorry, I think this one should have been removed as it is November 13th, and that says November 4th. The East Boston Artists Group is proud to announce the opening of a new exhibit for East Boston artists. This is being done in conjunction with the ICA and is at the Watershed location on Marginal Street in the Shipyard. The event will be November 18th and 19th, this coming weekend from 1 to 4 p.m. And there's a reception on November 18th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. For more information, please check their website at www.eastbostonartistgroup.com. Also on Saturday, November 18 is the Sacred Heart Church Christmas Bazaar. They start with a pancake breakfast with Santa in the early morning, with the fair, bake sale, and raffles starting closer to 12 p.m. Please check Facebook or their website for more information and details on how you can participate. Speaking of bake sales and Christmas bazaars, on Saturday, November 25th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Grace Church up in Harborview neighborhood will be hosting a bake sale and holiday decorations sale in support of the Grace Church Food Pantry. They are looking for donations of baked good as well as people to buy them. We encourage everyone to support this local effort to help ensure that their great programming continues. As a reminder, the December JPNA monthly meeting is actually a holiday party. We will be returning to the Jeffries St Yacht Club this year, and we do thank them for allowing us to have our event at their location. All are welcome to attend. This is a potluck. We encourage you to bring a main or side dish to share with others. And the date will be Monday, December 11th, and it will be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. We did also want to make an announcement.
Margaret, sorry to interrupt you, Margaret, but I remember you mentioned you wanted to mention specifically that we will be providing desserts and drinks, correct?
Yes, you are correct. For the holiday potluck, the JPNA provides all paper goods, the drinks, and the desserts. That is why we're asking people to bring a main or side dish to share with others. There is no limit on what you can make, but you will be asked to label all items. So if you make something that involves nuts or something else, we will make sure that people are aware. Thank you for pointing that out, Andrew. We did want to make also a quick announcement. The JPNA has received several questions from residents about next steps in regards to the Marginal Street Shipyard. As a reminder, the Marginal Street Shipyard presented at our planning and zoning meeting in July, and committed at that time to return in the future. We have asked them, sent a formal request asking them to return to the neighborhood association in January. This is the November monthly meeting. December is the holiday party. So January, we felt was a time that we could devote almost the entire monthly meeting to them. We will hold the agenda for them. We also resupplied them with the list of questions and information that people had asked for them to bring back. And we are hopeful that this will continue the conversation. We will keep you updated and let you know that their response. Before we go to the police, as I see Officer Santolo is here, I did see that there are several representatives of elected officials here this evening. And I'm clicking through very quickly to find them, but Andrew or Josh, if you see anyone as well, please feel free to jump in.
I did see Sebastian, forgive me for forgetting whose office he's from, Sebastian Para. That's
Yep.
Gabriella,
From
right?
Gabriella. Yep.
From Gabriella. And I see that Melavilla Gomez is here as well. And I believe she is with State Rep Adrian Mataro's office, correct?
No, Mella's
Office Neighborhood Services.
Oh,
Office of Neighbors there. Sorry, you know what? I was looking at one and then
you
reading
saw
Marcella's
Marcella.
name. Yes,
You
I
saw
was
Marcella.
like, yeah. So Marcella Lopez Romero is from Rep Mataro's office. I apologize. But we will be hearing from the mayor's liaison in a little bit. And then does anybody see any other Oh, we're up to 3 pages now. So I'm trying to click through everybody really quickly. If we missed you, please let us know in the chat and we will make sure to recognize you between our next meetings. And I would like to point out that Sarah McCammon is joining us this evening from the Harborfront Neighborhood Alliance. I see she's here as well. And I'm going to then move over to Officer Santolo and let him know that we do have a very full agenda this evening. So if we could focus on Jeffries Point. And as always, we really appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you. Take it away. You're on mute.
Yeah, so we're using this, myself and Officer Alvarez, Officer Mosley, Officer Alvarez. We're actually on Sergeant Tolo's phone because Officer Alvarez had an issue trying to get it into this into Zoom, the Zoom meeting. So, but all right, we're just gonna we only have this 2 things that happened at Jeffries Point area. I don't know if you go ahead.
Yeah, we had an incident involving a tractor trailer. This is an 18-wheeler traveling up on Sumner Street. It was trying to make a turn onto Seaver Street. He tried to maneuver around. Obviously, he wasn't able to do so, and he struck parked vehicle. And that case was referred to the out investigator who follow up with the incident to make the further investigation to issue citations. Yeah, the incident that we had at the point, it was a larceny from a motor vehicle. Caller reported that on November 10th, she parked her vehicle on Frankfurt Street, a Honda Fit. And the next morning, the rear wheels of the vehicle were missing. The vehicle was on blocks. And that's all we have for the Jeffries Point area. We had a couple of stolen motor vehicles that were recovered in East Boston, but they're stolen out of East Boston. But they were left somewhere else, not in Jeffries Point area. And that's all we have. The message regarding packages. Remember, the season is coming, so be very careful with the packages because that's an ongoing issue.
I did want to just bring up, thank you for that, by the way. I did just want to bring up, and maybe Mela or Sebastian from Gabriella's office, you could answer the question. You know, Brophy Park is a historic park, and the wrought iron fence was damaged pretty significantly by that tractor trailer truck. And we're obviously hoping that it will be repaired back to its original state. Does anybody have any information about that or how that will be transpiring? I'm assuming that the driver that was cited and or the company would be responsible for paying that, but I just want to make sure that the fence is repaired to the way it was before and not being replaced or anything like that, because it is a historic area. So
yeah, I can maybe share some of what I've been able to do. So thank you for you guys, first of all, for flagging it for me. I really appreciate it. I was able to get to email the Parks Commissioner, Commissioner Woods. Still waiting to hear back from him in terms of like what he can actually do. It's helpful to know that you would like it to remain in the original wrought iron fence, because I wasn't sure if he was going to do that or just like replace the whole fence. But I will definitely advocate for that to be restored and not just replaced. That's helpful context. I'll keep you guys looped in. I haven't had a ton of luck getting in touch with him, but again, I will persist and make sure that
That's great. Yeah, and I mean replacing it would be awful. So it does appear as though it might be able to just sort of be put back and then maybe soldered back together in some fashion, because I don't think that they actually damaged the fence itself.
Yeah.
It's more that it's just not where it's supposed to be. It got pushed off to the side. So hopefully it's something that they can repair and have it look the way it looked before, because it's a very nice fence. So,
and I'm happy to stop by too tomorrow and take pictures so that Commissioner Woods knows exactly like what needs to get done and doesn't like plan for other work or then need
actually,
to go.
I'm happy to send you photos of it as well if that's easier for you. So
yeah, if you have them, that'd be great. Thank you, Andrew.
sure, no problem. Thank you.
Andrew, that's all we have for the Jeffries Point area. Our drug unit made a pretty good size drug bust towards the end of last month out of a guy who was distributing fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin, and they're affected an arrest. And the suspect lived in the Orleans street area, but he's already put away.
Excellent.
Mhm. Do we have any questions in the chat, Andrew? I just want to check before we move on.
No questions in the chat. Oh, wait, sorry. For some reason, my chat has moved. Karen Madalena had mentioned that the Parks Department has people that on their staff that do iron work. So hopefully that will be something they can do here. That was basically it, though.
Okay. And I just want to reiterate to the officers that we would love it if you would come by our holiday party. We see you once a month. Yeah, it would be great to see you life size and in person. So please come by. And then I do want to check in with Mela and see Mela, do you have any other updates for us today?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. So just a quick reminder, my name is Mela. I'm the East Boston Liaison for the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up in December. I just wanted to quickly highlight the Christmas tree lightings in case any of you are interested or wanting to attend. The first one that we have in the neighborhood is December 1st in Orion Heights. It's hosted by the Ruggiero Family Memorial Home. I believe that's at 6 p.m. They've been posting flyers, but definitely come check that out. December 3rd is the Mayor's Trolley Tour, Enchanted Trolley Tour, with a stop at Maverick. The mayor should be arriving around 6:15 for the tree lighting, but there will be refreshments and other entertainment prior to that. So please come by and stop by, invite folks. Then we have December 8th, we have the final tree lighting at Central Square at 6 p.m. This one's hosted by Veronica Robles Cultural Center. And they should all be really fun. I will be at all of them. So I hope you can come out, make it out to them. And that's really all I have. The only other thing that I will add, and this is for folks that are interested in this, there's a group called Now and There, and they are working on the triennial. It's like an art focused event that happens in 2025. It's citywide, and they're looking for 15 compelling new public art commissions across the city. They're hoping to partner with local organizations and groups to share about the work and ways to partner with them for this triennial. If you're interested in this, please let me know. They're looking for voices from the community that can help them invite folks to input sessions where they'll hear from the community and see where we want public art, as well as what kind of public art would be interesting to folks in the neighborhood. this is a mouthful, so I know it's a lot to process. I will drop it in the chat, and I don't know if the chat just goes to Andrew, but I think it does. Maybe you can put it in the minutes or some sort of summary for folks. Does that sound good?
If you send it in the chat, I'll send it to everybody else.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you want to do that, or it will be in the notes. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely. We're happy to share. And then if you're okay with it, please feel free to share your contact information with Andrew in the chat as well.
Yep.
We're happy to share that out with the community as well.
Thank you guys. Yeah.
No problem.
There is one comment in the chat, and I think it goes back to the tractor trailer issue. And this is something, and I'm not sure if this person knows that this is something that we've been dealing with for a while. And actually, they were asking if the city can clearly mark truck routes, no truck routes. We've actually recently had some updated signage installed because of that. But I'm wondering if maybe more needs to be done.
Yeah, I'm thinking of setting up a walkthrough with the transportation department, just because I know that in particular Jeffries Point, like Jeffries Street gets hit a lot too with trucks. And I've heard this complaint just kind of all over the place. So I just want to make sure that they can kind of see how narrow the streets are and the urgency of it. So that's kind of
I'm almost thinking it might be worthwhile to have signage specifically for the shipyard, because that's where they're going. So instead of like no trucks, like 99% of the time, the trucks are going to the shipyard. We do have other businesses in the neighborhood that larger trucks would deliver to, such as restaurants and things like that, but they're not typically 18-wheelers that we see going to the shipyard. So I'm just a suggestion. I thought that might be helpful because that's what they're looking for. And unfortunately, their GPS is what the issue is. Their GPS is what takes them the wrong way. So
right. Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably going to be the next step, is just planning a walkthrough with Boston, the transportation department, and then if any of you on leadership would like to join, happy to also loop you in. And y'all are the experts in Jeffries Point, so I want to honor that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's all in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, Manuela, and we appreciate you assisting us Mela, pardon me. Appreciate you assisting us with everything. We're going to move on to the presentation by the MBTA in regards to the red blue line connector. We're hearing this evening from Shannon Greenwell and other members of her team who she'll introduce. The MBTA is proceeding with the 30% design and environmental review of the red blue connector, which would connect the blue line at Bowdoin down Charles Street to Charles MGH. And this, for anybody who has been active in transportation in East Boston, this is excellent news, as it has been advocated for a significant period of time. Shannon, you have approximately 15 minutes. Let us know when you want to move forward on slides. And people, please do put in questions in the chat during the presentation so we can move to them very quickly. Take it away, Shannon.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you all for having me this evening. We can go right to the next slide so that we have some time at the end for questions. So my name is Shannon Greenwell. I'm a senior project manager at the MBTA in the Office of the Chief Engineer, and I am leading this 30% in environmental review phase of design for the Red Blue Connector project. So this project, as an overview, seeks to connect the red and the blue lines by extending the blue line beyond its current terminus at Bowdoin Station through a newly connected tunnel underneath Cambridge Street to connect to the Red Line Charles MGH station through a new below-grade Blue Line station. So that top right image that you see is how Blue Line operations currently runs, utilizing the Bowdoin Loop. Under the Red Blue Connector design, you'll see the below image trains would travel directly from Government Center, bypassing Bowdoin Station to that new Blue Line station at Charles MGH. Bowdoin Station would be decommissioned to passengers, and we would reuse that area in support of the project. Next slide, please. So the goal of the Red Blue Connector project is really to improve mobility and access to healthcare for East Boston as well as the North Shore. This is particularly impactful, we know, as the Blue Line serves many riders that come from households with lower incomes and many riders who are transit dependent. Currently, folks traveling from the Blue Line who want to access the Red Line would make an intermediate transfer via the Orange Line at State or the Green Line at Government Center. The Red Blue Connector project eliminates that need for that intermediate Green Line or Orange Line transfer by connecting the two lines directly at Charles MGH. This reduces travel time and it improves capacity at our downtown stations by alleviating the congestion caused by those intermediate transfers. It also brings Blue Line passengers directly to the Mass General Medical campus and the adjacent medical facilities. Next, please. So we're currently funded through 30% design, as well as both the state and federal environmental review processes. To continue our state environmental review process, we submitted a notice of project change to MEPA last month, and we anticipate getting our MEPA certificate this week. That will confirm our path going forward for our state environmental review process. We anticipate that that's going to be a supplemental and then a final draft environmental impact report. We're also moving through the federal NEPA process to ensure that we're keeping the federal review process open as well. And while we're funded through the 30% design and environmental review phase, we do not currently have funding secured for final design or construction of the project. So you can go to the next slide, please. The preliminary engineering and the environmental review work that we're doing now is building off of a lot of project work that has already been done to date. The concept of the Red Blue Connector certainly predates the dates that you see on this slide here, but it's really this body of work that we're building off of for this phase of design. So in 2010, we had filed a DEIR with MEPA and received our certificate. That process evaluated 2 build alternatives. It also recommended a tunneling methodology comprised of TBM, tunnel boring machine, cut and cover, as well as sequential excavation. In 2018, a constructability study took on the task of reevaluating that construction methodology, and it made a new recommendation for cut and cover for the entirety of the project. It also updated the ridership. We've seen a lot of growth along both the Blue Line as well as the Red Line in terms of development and job opportunities. And lastly, in 2021, a concept design report was published, and that updated the station design based on current codes. It reaffirmed that cut and cover construction methodology approach. And probably most impactfully, we coordinated with Mass General Hospital to incorporate an Eastern head house in their new clinical building that's currently under construction. Next, please. As I had mentioned, we looked at 2 build alternatives in 2010. They were very similar in a lot of ways. The one area that they differed most substantially was decommissioning or continuing to provide passenger service at Bowdoin Station. In 2010, the preferred alternative is alternative 1 that you see here, which eliminated service to Bowdoin Station as the intermediate stop between Government Center and the new Blue Line station. This was found to provide a better travel time for Blue Line passengers connecting to the Red Line. And it was also found to save the cost associated with rebuilding the Bowdoin platforms, as the Red Blue Connector extension cannot utilize the existing Bowdoin loop or the station platforms due to an operating restriction in the loop and the elevation of the existing platforms. Next, please. A constructability update in 2018 reevaluated that 3 methodology approach to constructing the tunnel to see if it was still appropriate given current technology, cost changes, experience of the local market. And at that point, it was recommended that cut and cover would be utilized for the entirety of the project. Next, please. And that brings us to the concept design report. And a lot of that is really serving as the basis of this next phase of design that we're working on currently. Some high-level program elements include that 2,000-foot tunnel underneath Cambridge Street, a new below-grade fully accessible Blue Line station connecting to the existing Red Line Charles MGH head house, incorporating an Eastern head house that brings passengers on the eastern end of the platform directly to the Mass General campus through the Ragan building under construction, It also uses the decommissioned Bowdoin Station area for ancillary facilities in support of the project. And it also considers the placement of storage tracks in the project area. So I'll just use the last couple of slides to give a little bit of detail on some of these highlights. Next, please. So in 2010, we actually only had a western head house on the western side of the platform. On the eastern end of the platform, there was just an emergency egress bringing you to a hatch in the median in the street. In 2021, we were able to integrate a full eastern head house working with Mass General. So we will have our eastern head house will be incorporated into the second phase of their clinical building currently under construction. So on the right-hand side, you just see some renderings. The top right is passengers entering at grade. And then the bottom right, you see that interior concourse to bring you down to the platform. This is beneficial not only to provide us with 2 fully accessible head houses, but also to bring passengers not just to the Red Line, but also have them access the Mass General campus much more easily. Next, please. So as I had mentioned, the Red Blue Connector extension can't utilize the Bowdoin Loop or the existing station platforms. That's because we cannot carry passengers through the Bowdoin Loop because the tight radius of that curve does not allow us to evacuate passengers safely in the event of an emergency. Also, the existing platforms are not deep enough to accommodate an appropriate slope to bring the tunnel from Government Center traveling down to that new Blue Line station. So eliminating the passenger service at Bowdoin, it avoids the additional costs that would be associated with relocating those Bowdoin station platforms. It also actually provides a passenger benefit of removing that intermediate stop between Government Center and the new Blue Line station at Charles MGH. Riders do see a benefited reduced travel time in trying to get to the Red Line. So that preferred alternative in 2010 did decommission the station, and we are carrying that forward as a project element. Next, please. The space at Bowdoin Station would be repurposed for things such as connecting the existing tunnel to the new tunnel, traveling down Cambridge Street, emergency ventilation and emergency egress, other things that we do need to support the project in the area. Additionally, this area is being looked at for potential train and maintenance storage. Next, please. As many of you are probably aware, in East Boston, Orient Heights is our primary storage yard for trains for the Blue Line. We have limited capacity out beyond Wonderland Station as well as beyond the current Bowdoin Station. So this project has been tasked with looking for opportunities to provide us with additional space for storing disabled trains or for storing maintenance equipment for any sort of construction or maintenance activities that we need to take on. So here we have 3 options that we'll be evaluating for this phase. To the left, you'll see 2 tail tracks to the west of the station. In the center there, we have pocket tracks to the east of the new Blue Line station. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you see the repurposing of the existing asset at Bowdoin Loop. So that's something that we'll be continuing to work through in this phase of design. Next, please. So that brings us to our project timeline and some milestones. As I said, in October, we filed our Notice of Project Change with MEPA to continue our state environmental review. We anticipate to be at 15% design in spring of 2024 and expecting that in spring of 2025, we would be done with the 30% design, both state and federal environmental reviews and production of design build documents to get us ready for the next contract. At that point, we anticipate that after final design, construction would take about 5 years on the corridor. And of course, this timeline is certainly subject to change based on funding availability to be able to engage with that next design build contract. We have $30 million programmed in our CIP to fund the project. And our concept design report in 2021 estimated the total project cost to be $850 million. We'll update that project cost at the 15% design, and that would be informed by our advanced design work, as well as considering current escalation factors and current market prices and conditions. Next, please. So I just wanted to be able to come and reach out to some of the neighborhood associations. We were at the library in East Boston last month doing a larger public meeting. My contact information is here if anybody has any follow-up questions, or if we have time now, I'm also able to answer some questions on the spot.
Okay, we did have a few people message in the chat. I believe that we have questions that you answered later in your
Okay, great.
Presentation. I have messaged those people just to make sure that they had their question answered. So please, if you ask me a question, please double check your chat and make sure that your question has been answered. But I will go back just to comment. This one resident says long awaited, looking forward to it. This person asked about the cut and cover process. Obviously, I'm assuming that would mean that Cambridge Street would be cut and then covered.
Right, exactly. Yep, it's a very descriptive title.
Yeah. How long do they anticipate that taking? Because that's obviously a pretty heavily traveled street. Do you have any information about that, or at this point?
So so in the 2021 concept report, we were able to commit to 2 lanes of traffic traveling in both directions for the entirety of the construction period, except for some nights or weekends where we may have to impede on that. We know there's a fire station, there's medical facilities, there's an emergency room, so we're certainly very sensitive to the fact that we have to keep traffic moving. Also very sensitive to the fact that it's a big pedestrian corridor, as well as cyclists traveling from Cambridge to get to downtown Boston. The way that the cut and cover approach would be working is that we would be trenching, sort of supporting the box where the tunnel would be, restoring the surface as quickly as we're able to, and then the work would be taking place sort of below ground. So again, we'll be sort of working out the logistics of sort of traffic management and what that construction phasing would look like, but previous design was able to keep us with 2 lanes of traffic in both directions.
Okay, then there's a couple questions regarding Bowdoin Station during construction. Will they be keeping Bowdoin Station open during construction, and also will there be any effect on Government Center?
Sure. So we are planning with the previous design work of providing Blue Line service to Government Center. So as an early action item, we would be adding a crossover that would allow us to turn trains there. We anticipate that service would be running normally, except for a couple of situations, maybe some nights and weekends, where we had to do some tie-in work on that end of the project. Bowdoin Station would be decommissioned to passengers during the construction phase, and then again would remain closed to passengers as an intermediate stop in the final build condition of the project as well.
This resident's asking if there's any opportunity to expedite the timeline, the total timeline.
So right now we are moving through the environmental process. So some of those milestones are tied to sort of hearing back from the environmental regulators. So we're working on that with them. The design build decision will allow us to sort of finish design at the same time as being able to evaluate some early actions that we can take. But yeah, we're certainly evaluating opportunities to both be as cost effective as possible and also looking at ways that we can be the most streamlined as possible with the project schedule.
This other question has to do with, I guess, sort of a terminology question. When you say 30% design and 15% design, what exactly does that mean?
Sure. So 15% design, we also sometimes call that concept design. That is going to be the work that needs to be done to submit our supplemental DEIR to MIPA. So that is enough project design information to really understand some of the impacts and the benefits to be able to respond to the DEIR questions that we'll have to be answering. Once we're at 30% design, we're able to produce design build documents. And at that point, we're much further along in the actual design of the project. So 15% really aligns with our next environmental review milestone in understanding those impacts and those benefits. And that 30% design would be the last design milestone under this contract.
And it is just specifically the design phase, not like funding for the actual project.
Correct. Exactly. Okay. We're funded through the 30%. We still need funding to complete design, and we need funding for construction. And we're certainly undertaking that task at the same time as well.
Excellent. That's all we've got.
Great. Alrighty, well, you certainly have my contact information. Feel free to get with us with any other questions. We anticipate in the spring we'll be reaching back out to stakeholders with some new design information as well as that next environmental milestone. So look forward to getting in touch with you again then.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shannon.
Thank
if we
you.
could just ask you to throw your contact information in the chat and or a web page or somewhere that people who are interested who want additional information could get in touch with you or learn more about the project, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Next up, we have the Conservation Law Foundation. The Conservation Law Foundation is a wonderful organization here in the city of Boston, and the JPNA actually asked them to come here this evening. Chapter 91 is the chapter of law, and I'm sure that Maggie will go into more detail and probably correct half of what I say here, but just to frame the conversation a little bit. Chapter 91 has a great deal of influence on the construction that happens directly on the waterfront. And as a part of that, there are subsidiary issues that come up, and also it has a great impact in the power and the impact of how we can impact development that goes on around the waterfront as well. The JPNA felt that every few years we should have a little bit of an education moment where we learn more about Chapter 91 and share access to where people could learn even more if they wanted to, especially as there are ongoing issues. As an example of an ongoing issue, Roseland Development had a community benefit agreement with the neighborhood of Jeffries Point, and they have, from our point of view, they would argue differently, but from our point of view, they have not fulfilled that agreement. And so in the past several months, there have been meetings with elected officials and others affiliated with Roseland to see if we can determine how it's going to look they're fulfilling this agreement. So that's just one example of many of how this impacts us. But Maggie, we'd like to thank you for being here this evening. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And again, you have approximately 20 minutes and Susan will be handling your slides. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Thanks, Margaret. It's great to be here. And I don't really have anything to correct. I thought that was right on target in terms of what Chapter 91 does as a general matter and why it's so important. So a couple of very small personal caveats before I start. One is, I don't know if you can hear how congested I am, but I am a little bit sick. So take that for what it is. And then I don't know if you'll hear my daughter or son screaming in the background, but that's there's a definitely non-0% chance that that's going to happen. So my apologies in advance. So Chapter 91, as Margaret said, is a state law that really impacts how you are able to use and enjoy your waterfront. And so while it's a very specific law, it has a real personal impact on a lot of people. And I think as far as laws that I've read about, it is not, it's far from the driest one. I think there's a lot to grab onto there, just as a citizen or a resident. And I'm not sure if I actually introduced myself. I'm Maggie Sullivan. I'm a senior attorney for community resilience and the interim director of community resilience at Conservation Law Foundation. And I actually used to live in Jeffries Point for a little while anyway. I was on Sumner Street for a few years. So it's a great place. Can I get the next slide, please? So my agenda, it's going to be a pretty general overview of the law. So I'm not going to get too much into the weeds, although there will be a couple of sort of vocabulary-oriented slides. But the idea is going to be to look a little bit at the history of the Public Waterfront Act. What is it? How Boston's waterfront has transformed in recent history, the basics of the law and how it works, your rights on the waterfront, and what opportunities for engagement as members of the public you have as it relates to that law. Next slide, please. So the public trust doctrine is what the Public Waterfront Act embodies. It's the idea that natural resources like the air, sea, and shore should be held in trust for the public's use and enjoyment. And it has been around for a really long time. As long ago as the Justinian Code back during the Roman Empire. later compiled in the Magna Carta. And then when the British colonists came, they brought the public trust doctrine to Massachusetts, and it became part of the colonial ordinances when they came. It allowed for the public to fish, fowl, and navigate in privately held waterfront lands. And those words, fish, fowl, and navigate, as old-timey as some of them are, they're still used today in the law. Next slide, please. So moving forward, in 1866, the Public Waterfront Act, known as Chapter 91, was finally enacted. It retained public access rights over the rapidly expanding filling of historic tidelands. And that law also included a waterways licensing program for development on tidelands, ponds, and certain riverfront areas. And I'll talk a little bit later about what tidelands actually are, because that's a really important word for this law. And the idea was to ensure the proper public use of tidelands and waterfront areas. So those licenses then and licenses now list special conditions, and those special conditions list requirements regarding use, public access, and free public facilities that a specific site has to meet in order to proceed. Next slide, please. So up to 1979, fast forwarding. So there was an important case that came down from the state's highest court, the Supreme Judicial Court, deciding that the public had legal rights to use and access former tidelands. And say, for example, a private waterfront owner had a license, they can't just decide to change the use of that site unilaterally. They have to go through the licensing process to do that, because the proper public purpose has to be maintained. And then in the 1980s and 90s, there were more amendments to the Act and regulations that addressed use in present and former tidelands. So at that time, existing development was grandfathered, meaning that, say you had a use of a site that was legal at the time, it got licensed, then later the regulations wouldn't have allowed that anymore. If you were already doing that and got a license for it back when it was legal, you're grandfathered in unless you decide to change that use significantly, in which case you need to get a new license. And then the question is, how will the law continue to evolve, which it will. We feel that one major priority needs to be accommodating sea level rise in the regulations and the law, and also what other effects of climate change there are going to be on waterfront developments, because the regulations and the law this time really don't account for those issues, and they're obviously big ones. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture that's a really, I think, interesting illustration of how the shoreline has changed over the course of the last few centuries. And so I don't know if you can see it, but the red colored area is what the shoreline looked like back in 1630. And then all that gray area is what's been filled in since then. A lot of East Boston and a lot of the city as a whole was at one time underwater and has since been filled in. Next slide, please. So moving on to sort of how the waterfront itself has transformed over time. It used to be the dirtiest harbor in America, a dubious honor. So post-World War II, development shifted from what were centuries-old maritime commercial uses toward privately controlled commercial and residential uses, and you still see that dynamic today. And then up to the 1970s, the waters were noxious, toxic, a dumping ground for sewage. Waterfront areas were essentially unusable and covered with abandoned buildings and unsafe conditions. Then up in the 1980s, to toot CLF's horn a little bit, we, along with other plaintiffs, filed a lawsuit against the state to clean up Boston Harbor. And the result of that was that we won, and there was a $4 billion cleanup project, as well as Deer Island wastewater treatment plant got built. And then further developments in the 1990s and 2000s involved billions more in public funds spent for the Big Dig, the Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy Greenway, and also new rapid transit lines to the seaport. Next slide, please. So it's now a very different harbor than it was back when it was the dirtiest harbor in America. So in the 2000s and 2010s, the seaport was famously or notoriously, depending how you look at it, transformed from parking lots to office towers, convention center, luxury residences. And today, it's just a much cleaner harbor, and other public investments mean that the waterfront has become some of the hottest real estate in the city. And one tension we see a lot in the seaport, for example, but as other parts of the city get built up as well, is the tension between private development and the public's rights to access and use tidelands. Those tensions are at their height. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit of the history of the law and the history of sort of an environmental and I guess industrial history of the waterfront. But I want to talk about the law itself too, the way it stands now. And I don't really know another way to explain some of the provisions of the law except to explain them. So with apologies for the text-heavy slide, I'll just explain a few key terms that you might see if you're engaging with this law. So filled tidelands are tidelands that are now buildable land because of the presence of fill. So it's what used to be water that's now been filled in, and it just, you know, has sidewalks, buildings, you can walk on it. It feels like it was always land, but it wasn't. Facilities of public accommodation, or FPAs, are facilities that are available to the public for free, and those are required depending on what kind of project you're trying to license. Facilities of private tenancy, or FPTs, are kind of the opposite. They're things like condos, business offices, areas that are not available to the general public. Water-dependent uses are uses that require the water to operate, say a marina or an aquarium, something that actually needs the water to function. Landlocked tidelands are what used to be tidelands, but they were cut off from the shoreline by a road or are more than 250 feet away from the shoreline. And then a municipal harbor plan, or MHP, is a long-term vision for public open space and development across connected sites on the water. And I don't go into a lot of detail about MHPs in this presentation, but you should know that that process is in flux based on a Supreme Judicial Court decision last year. And finally, designated port areas, or DPAs, are areas for commercial shipping, fishing, or other maritime commerce. And those are under a lot of pressure right now as well to be sort of removed from those protections in terms of what they're allowed to be used for and to be used for other things. So that's something we're talking about a lot over at CLF as well. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, you don't have to go back to the last slide, but I did mean to mention, so one thing I'm going to pop in the chat is a link to a publication that CLF came out with back in 2018 called The People's Guide to Chapter 91. And it's a really, and it looks like it's still loading. There it goes. It went into the chat now. It's a really useful primer about Chapter 91 and what your rights are. So as much as I hope that this presentation gives you a useful overview, the People's Guide is a really helpful resource if you're looking to dig a little bit deeper. Thanks for putting that in the general chat. So I've mentioned the word tidelands a whole lot. It's a key way that the law defines where people's rights stop and start. So tidelands are basically land or tidal flats located below the high water mark. So everything below that high tide, seaward of that high tide mark, is tidelands. Private tidelands is a little bit of a term of art. It's sort of, it's not just every single private residence that's on the waterfront. It has to do with whether that land was conveyed to private owners during the 1600s. It's one of those spots in the law that's really not intuitive. It's just sort of a special way that the legislators defined something. And private tidelands are typically between the high tide mark and the low tide mark. And then Commonwealth tidelands are tidelands currently or historically owned by the state, municipality, or public authority. And it's all land seaward of the mean low water line. So in effect, that a lot of times means that Commonwealth tidelands are filled tidelands, because if you're talking about developments below the low water line, that must mean that they're being built on something. So a lot of times that's what that ends up meaning. Next slide, please. So more basics about how the law works. So some activities require a waterfront license. So that includes new structures, permanent or seasonal, like roads, bridges, parking lots, pipes or tunnels, filling and dredging for channel improvement or infrastructure, substantial changes in use, like converting a parking lot into offices, for example, or removing structures from the land. And obviously, that's the kind of development that might need a license, but it has to be on the waterfront, in tidelands for Chapter 91 to kick in. And then some activities on Chapter 9, or some activities on the waterfront are exempt, like overhead cables, wires or conduits, fish ladders, or continuation of existing grandfathered uses, for example. Next slide. So a lot of what Chapter 91 lays out is the licensing process that developers have to undergo in order to develop something on the waterfront. So that starts out with something called an application for or request for determination. And DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, just a state agency, decides whether the project the developer is talking about is water dependent or non-water dependent. And even end of Chapter 91 even applies. And then in a public notice or public hearing, that means that DEP is letting the public know in an environmental, in an online publication called the Environmental Monitor. They're letting the public know that this project is happening, giving the public a chance to weigh in within 30 days. And then after that 30-day period, which also often includes a public hearing, in addition to the opportunity to comment, DEP will decide whether a license will be issued. If not, what other information do they need? And it will provide for special conditions, like I talked about before, about, how high are the buildings allowed to be, for example, what kinds of other public benefits will be provided for, where will the facilities of public accommodation be, how long will the license be, and even if there's a management plan required, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And then there's an opportunity to appeal. If you disapprove of what DEP did, there are certain requirements for being able to appeal, but you can take care to establish your standing to do that, and then you can appeal within 21 days if you disapprove of what DEP decided as far as the license goes. And then a certificate of compliance is a way that the developer shows that they're complying with the license that DEP issued. Next slide. So this is a bit of a slog, but so for all sites, certain things are required for all sites, regardless of whether they're water dependent or not. So there are a lot of constraints on whether you can build structures that extend over the water, or whether you can fill in water that previously was just open water. That's not often allowed. And if it is, it has to provide for public pedestrian access. You have to keep whatever water dependent uses are currently in operation there or have been operational within the last 5 years. And then you have to preserve the public's ability to fish, fowl, navigate, and pass freely. So that's for all projects, regardless of whether they need the water to function or not. And then for non-water dependent sites, so say a condominium building, an office building, really anything that doesn't need the water to function, you need to leave 50% of the space on the site open and publicly accessible and usable. And then you also have building height constraints. So if you're within 100 feet of the shoreline, you can't build a building that's higher than 55 feet. And that minimum, or that maximum rather, slowly increases as you get farther away from the water. You also have to include signage on the site about the license number so that people can contact DEP if they want to about non-compliance. You have to list what facilities are available to the public, and you might have to list details about your management plan. And then you also can't have facilities of private tenancy. So as I said before, places where the public isn't generally allowed. You can't have that on piers or the ground floor within 100 feet of the shoreline. And so a management plan, which I've mentioned a few times. So in addition to the special conditions in a license, a management plan addresses some of sort of the nitty-gritty of day-to-day operations, like signage, how the site will be maintained, hours and rules of operation, what certain things might cost for the public to access, how the project is getting financed, limitations on how many private events you can have, just as an example of, just as a few examples. So next slide, please. So you have rights when it comes to the waterfront. You have the right to be provided with and to access public facilities and open space on the waterfront, to freely move about and use public open spaces and licensed public facilities, to demand public benefits in exchange for private development of tidelands, to see any waterways license or management plan, to expect readable and unambiguous signage, to expect well-maintained and actively programmed public areas on the tidelands, to participate in a meaningful way in the licensing process, and to appeal a licensing decision that you disapprove of. Next slide. So here are just a couple of images of what public benefits might look like. So one of these is the rooftop deck of the Envoy Hotel. So one example of a public benefit or a facility of public accommodation is restaurants. You know, obviously there are issues in terms of how affordable those are to the general public, depending on what restaurant you're talking about, but that does count as a place where the general public is allowed to go. And then you also have open space. That's an example, the public green at Fan Pier, where.
Hey, Maggie, just a
Yeah.
quick time check. We are going to need to move on soon. So, like if there's other things to go over, that'd be great.
Not a problem. I'll skip to the to slide number 18. Thank you for that. Great. So I just want to give you a little more information about your opportunities to engage. So the slide we just skipped over, which is fine. If you see a site that is non-compliant with its license, if you see a place where the public is supposed to be allowed and they're not allowed there, you can contact DEP just as an example. Or if you see a sign that's not legible or accessible, that's a problem too. You can also take advantage of the public comment period for new licenses and hearings that you're allowed to go to as well. And then you're also allowed to appeal, and you're allowed to participate in the process for municipal harbor plans as well. So I'll cut it there with apologies for going over, but I'm not sure if we have time for questions or not. If we do, I'm happy to field them.
We do. Let me scroll back up here. Hold on one second. Okay. First question. So this is from a resident question for CLF. The owners of the shipyard, the Boston Harbor Shipyard and Marina is what they're referring to, are seeking to build a 70+ foot tall building in front of the lowest lying buildings in Jeffries Point. They initially began describing the building use as boat storage, but they later changed the use to boat repair. Our understanding was that this use change was to allow them to comport with the MOU they have with the state regarding Chapter 91. The question is, why does this MOU still exist? What keeps the developers honest if it can be so easily circumvented? And what protects residents from abuse of the law in a situation where situation like this, where the developers claim they're exempt from zoning and exempt from Chapter 91. I believe the MOU is something with Massport and the state. I don't know if it has to do with Chapter 91 or not, but.
So the MOU with Massport does have to do with Chapter 91. But having said that, I have not looked into this particular project in advance of this meeting, and I don't want to, I can't really answer the question specifically without doing that, because I don't want to give you information that's not accurate. If you want to send me an email, my contact information is on the last slide of the deck, and you're more than welcome to email me. I really am happy to try and answer questions that are more project specific as they come in, but it's unlikely that I'll be able to speak directly to specific projects without having prepared ahead of time.
Did I hear in your presentation though that waterfront projects are not to be more than 55 feet?
Yeah, no, that is accurate, and that definitely caught my ear when that was part of the question. I think. Having said that, though,
possibly the MOU is the
I don't
reason.
know about the MOU. I don't know about whether this site is part of a municipal harbor plan. I would have to know more about the specifics, because there is some variation in that requirement depending on the specific situation. But yeah, I mean, in a vacuum on its face, that would be a problem. Yeah.
Okay. The next one is, I understand that the management plans are updated every X number of years and needs to be negotiated with the DEP. I'm most interested in better understanding the interior spaces. It seems several facilities are available, but we as a community don't know about these, which is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so management plans, I want to say, are updated every 5 years. But that actually may depend, that may vary from management plan to management plan. I'm seeing if I can just look that up on the fly. Yeah, I don't know that there's a set interval at which management plans have to get updated. But it's true that there is a public process involved and that the public has the right to weigh in on management plans as they come up. And in terms of the, I mean, let's see. I mean, management plans do have to explain, or they often explain anyway, what public benefits are offered. And so again, I would have to see the specific site and and look up the license, but being involved in the management plan amendment process is I think something that she can fairly expect to do.
Okay. How does this apply to land, which this is kind of going back to a similar question. And if you can't answer it, we'll move past it, but we'll ask the question. How does this apply to land which is owned by a public entity, Massport, but has been leased to a private entity, specifically around any new construction that gets built on the property? Current top of mind for us is the very large, over 55 feet buildings, which are water dependent. Is that entirely exempt from the law? I feel like I feel like you maybe have answered it because it's dependent upon what the area is designated as, like if it's a designated port area or things like that, correct?
Well, I would say, I mean, if this is a Massport issue, then my instinct would be to say that it's dependent upon the MOU, which, I am generally familiar with, but do not know inside and out, without going back to look at it. So, I can't say without, I can't really answer that question without digging deeper into the MOU.
This person's question is almost identical to the one that was just asked. However, there is an additional part to it. And if you know the answer, is outdoor boat storage considered water dependent use?
That's a great question. I believe it is, yeah.
Okay. Is there a public process to the management plan renewal / review? Basically, I'm being asked if there's a way that we could be made aware when those things are happening as a community.
I believe there is, but I would have to go back and double check, which I'd be happy to do, and let you know. But I believe so. I know in the first instance there's a public process for management plans. I would think there's one for renewals as well, but I'd have to go back and take a look. I'd be happy to email Margaret after the fact with the answer to that.
If you wouldn't mind supplying your email in the chat, there are a couple people who are asking for it. If
it's on the last deck. It's on the last slide of the deck, but I can also put it in the chat.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great. Then I can just send it out.
Sure.
Let's see. And then this person said, and this may need to be the last question. You mentioned the evolution of updating of Chapter 91. Are you familiar with the December 2022 CZM review of the DPA in East Boston, specifically as it relates to Jeffries Point, where the CZM concludes these buffer areas are neighborhood amenity used for passive recreation and were created to benefit the East Boston community as mitigation for impacts of Logan International Airport. Their conversion back to industrial use is not reasonably foreseeable. Similarly, the residential uses, recreational open spaces, and yacht club are unlikely to be removed or converted with relative ease to industrial use, but these uses could be described if commingled with industrial activity. As a result, East Boston Designated Port Area Boundary Designation Report 11 CZM finds that the Jeffries Point Planning Unit does not meet the use character criterion my God, this is a mouthful, as required by 301 CMR, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, this is the last question. Yeah, this is the last one.
I mean, I am generally familiar with the decision, and I've been following the subsequent litigation about the boundary review, but what was the question?
I guess if you were familiar with this.
I'm generally familiar with it.
I don't
yeah.
really see the question either.
Okay.
There is one other short question, Margaret. I'm just going to ask this question real quick.
Okay.
We'll move on. Do you have insight into the permitting or any approval process that I didn't see this part of the question that the shipyard would have to follow?
Again, I'm sorry, I can't really opine on that without knowing the specific site.
Okay, so I'm going to put your email in the chat, and you're probably going to get an email from some of these people.
Great.
Which to be honest with you, everyone who has emailed regarding the shipyard, if you do have questions that you would like to ask Maggie directly, feel free to email her. I'm going to put her email in the chat right now. That is the best way for you to get your answers. We do unfortunately need to move on to the next project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Again, I'd like to echo my thanks that Andrew has stated, Maggie. We appreciate you being here, especially as you are ill and have a toddler probably running around somewhere who needs to get to bed. But thank you very much for being here. If people would like to have CLF back in the future to address more specific aspects of Chapter 91, we're certainly happy to do that. Education is a great way to help us be prepared to. Well, I'm not really sure where to go with this sentence, but I'll just say that we're happy to do that. Thank you very much, Maggie. We are going to move on. You're welcome. We do have 2 development projects that need to present this evening. The first one's going to be Cafe Gloria. This is a second presentation, so they do not have to do the full length that they did. They have approximately 10 minutes. So if they could present for 5 minutes and then give a answer to a couple of questions. Cafe Gloria is located at 287 Maverick Street, and they are becoming before us because they are changing their zoning from retail to a restaurant cafe with no alcohol or liquor license. I apologize if I do not say your name correctly. Will Isaza is a resident of East Boston, and we will let him take it away and present. Will?
All right, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Okay, I was going to say, after all that, if I talked that fast and you weren't here, I was what I was going to do. But we'll go right ahead. You have about 5 minutes, and then
Awesome, thank you, Margaret. So yeah, I'll make this one short and sweet. I didn't receive any emails or any follow-up questions from the first presentation, so we can kind of cycle through these slides pretty quickly. So if we just want to move on to the next one. So as mentioned, Cafe Gloria will be taking over 287 Maverick Street in Jeffries Point with a signed lease already in hand, and we're just currently seeking the rezoning of the commercial space to restaurant cafe as opposed to just general retail. In order for us to start our build out. So the concept is, as you see here, Cafe Gloria. It'll be a coffee and espresso bar from an East Boston born and bred resident. We can move on to the next slide. Just some branding information as far as who we collaborated with, and just the general signage that we'll obviously propose once we get our permits in place. And we collaborated with Vimana Creative here, who's done many restaurants in the Fenway area, also Birds of Paradise in Brighton, a couple spots in Brookline as well. Next slide. So just a little bit more information on me and how this project came to be.
Hey, Will, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because we only have 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you to speak directly to this project so that we can make sure to get to questions. We do have another development project that needs to present after you, and we need to end on time at 8:30. So I appreciate the background, but you did present last month. So if you could just talk directly to this particular project. Thank you.
Sure, we can go ahead and move on. So here just our partners for the project as far as the actual product, Broadsheet Coffee Roasters out of Somerville. We're importing our own coffee bean in particular and roasting in Somerville. And then our espresso and equipment is from Avam, which they're out of Seattle. And we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And just some renderings of the actual space. As you can see, this is the front-facing area of 287 Maverick, the Mavan 3 group head espresso there for quick service, and our final renderings here of what we hope to have the space look like. Move on to the next. And then finally, this is just a little mock menu. Some of the things that are still up in the air just based on equipment and what we can get in will be sort of the right side of the menu. But other than that, we will have specialty coffee drinks, your classic coffee drinks, a rice bowl section, and some form of cold take-home food, as well as some teas available to you. But that should be the last slide, I believe. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, happy to answer.
All right, Will, thank you for that. There's one question in the chat. Last month, you explained this has seating for approximately 15 people. In order to be financially viable, you are basically going to be a takeout place. Is this correct?
The majority of the business will have to be takeout just because of the capacity. That's correct, yes.
Okay. And that is the only question we have for you. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Sorry about that, Will. I rushed you. You did a very, very thorough job last month. So I thought you were going to be very, very thorough this month. So I apologize. If I had realized you had that many fewer slides, I would have let you go. Just a quick reminder about our voting process. If you are eligible to vote, you will receive a ballot this Wednesday, November 15th. You will have until Friday, November 17th by 5 p.m. to complete your vote. No late votes will be accepted. Your vote will go to the email address that you've used to register for this particular meeting. If Wednesday evening, approximately 7 p.m. comes and you do not see a ballot in your inbox and you believe that you're eligible to vote, please check your spam mailbox. That is the most common reason that people find that they do not have a ballot, is because it is sent out from it is sent out as a group email, and sometimes it does get caught in spam. If it is not in your spam box and it is not in your inbox, then please email board@jeffriespoint.org and we will verify if you are eligible to receive a vote or not. After the results of the vote, the results are posted on our website, usually by Monday when the minutes are posted as well. And then we will keep you updated as the process moves forward. We're going to move forward to our next and final item on our agenda this evening. Up next, we have 49 Jeffries Street, Unit 1. The proposal is to erect a rear addition to Unit 1. This proposed project appeared at the October Planning and Zoning meeting. It is represented this evening by attorney Richard Lynds, and the developer is Olivia R. LaBarge. And I did see attorney Lynds here earlier, and I will let him take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Lynds. I represent Olivia LaBarge with respect to the project at 49 Jeffries. We can jump right to maybe the second or third slide. I know you're pressed for time. Go one more. Maybe one more after this. Okay, perfect. So quick overview. Located between Marginal and Sumner Street. It's an existing 2-unit building, both condos. She's not necessarily a developer. She's the owner occupant of the unit. So in this case, it's a relatively straightforward homeowner type project. If we could jump to the next slide, please. Just a bird's eye view of the site. Next slide. Outside view. Next slide. Street view. Next slide. Another street view. Next slide. Just a quick overview of where we're at in the process. We did hold an abutters meeting, and as Margaret said, we did make a presentation to the Planning and Zoning Subcommittee in October. We're hoping for a vote this evening. We likely will be done with the Board of Appeal process for this project probably early this winter, and we expect the permit to likely issue sometime by the spring of next year. if not sooner. And this is probably about 3 to 6 month process for construction. Next slide, please. Let's jump down maybe 1 or 2 more. Next slide. This is probably a good place to stop. So, as I said, there's a relatively straightforward process here. We have on the left side of the page the existing conditions. You can see it's a single bedroom unit with living space towards the rear. There is an outside deck that is attached to the unit. We're basically, if you look at the right side, closing in a portion of that deck, rebuilding a portion of the deck, and it's essentially extending the living area out to where that deck is. And because we're doing that, and because the conditions of this property are such that it's already non-conforming, it does trigger a few technical violations under the zoning code. The first is floor to area ratio, because this lot size already, essentially exceeds what would be permissible for gross floor area for the building. Any additional floor area, including even just a nominal amount of floor space, such as what we're proposing here, triggers the FAR violation. So we are requesting relief for that. Secondly, with respect to the rear yard, because we are rebuilding a portion of that deck is already in a non-conforming condition. We required some relief from the rear yard as well. Although you can see we aren't necessarily increasing the footprint of the building at all. We pretty much stay within the existing footprint that's there now. We also would trigger usable open space, because again, the conditions that exist here currently would be non-conforming, and any modification to the existing open space, such as what we're proposing, would trigger a violation for that. We can jump to the next slide, please. I think we have some elevations. Yeah, so our existing conditions are here. We're showing, the decks that are currently on the building. We're not modifying anything at the second or third level. It's really just the first level deck that you can see here. If we jump to the next slide, probably of the, yeah, here we go. So on the right side, we do see the enclosure showing that first level portion of the deck being enclosed. The decks will remain above, and then we have to rebuild the stairwell as well, coming out to the backyard. But as I said, we don't really change anything with respect to the footprint of the building. The violations that we're seeking relief from are essentially technical violations that reflect the additional floor space that we're proposing. And as I showed in the floor plan, the space is relatively small for the current unit. Obviously, the upper unit has more floor space with 2 levels. So Olivia is essentially just looking to increase the space here to allow for just a little bit more of a cozier size unit. And we feel that the impact is minimal based upon the current conditions of the building as it stands now. I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions, Margaret, if there are anything specific on this one.
We only have one comment right now. This resident opposes the addition. All houses on Jeffries Street are 344. I'm not exactly sure what that means. This addition will change the landscape of the street. Also, this will set a precedent for other homeowners on the street.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a modest addition to the building. I don't feel that, this is actually going to change much by way of the impact the surrounding properties, including the abutters. The structure, for all intents and purposes, already there. We're essentially enclosing that lower level only. So whether or not that sets precedent on the rest of the street, that's not really accurate. Every case is looked at on a case-by-case basis. Just because somebody encloses a portion of their property doesn't necessarily mean everybody else is entitled to the exact same thing. It would have to go through a similar process that Olivia is going through. And again, based upon the size of the unit that's currently existing, this is such a modest increase in size. We think it's very consistent with the planning objectives of Plan East Boston and the overall new zoning that's likely to be enacted in the coming weeks.
Well, we definitely don't want to put the cart before the horse there on that one. However, I do understand what you're saying. Thank you. I'm referring to the Plan East Boston comment you made. So that would actually be, oh, sorry. Sorry, this person, I don't know
We
if
have
this
one
is
more question in chat. Okay.
I don't know if, sorry, I don't know if this is a question or if it's a statement. You are extending the property with the deck is what I'm being told.
No, we're not extending the property of the deck at all. The deck is already there. We're enclosing that area that is, I don't know if you want to jump back to the elevation. We're enclosing the area where the deck currently is and replacing the balance of the deck with a smaller deck. I mean, it's essentially all within the footprint of what's already there today. Yeah, so you can see, I mean, the decks that are there are, you know, they're already existing. We're just essentially enclosing a small portion of, you know, that area. Look on the right side, says the proposed addition. It's actually not an addition at all. It's just enclosing what's there.
So there's no portion of the structure, deck or otherwise, that's moving further backwards than is currently in
Correct.
place.
Yeah, the only thing, Andrew, is the stairs. You can see that rebuilt staircase to the second floor. Currently, the stairs wrap. They probably come back where the deck currently sits. But because we're sort of modifying that experience for the back of the property, you can see the French doors or sliders that are shown in that middle pane. We're moving the stairs coming out backwards versus wrapping towards the deck. So yeah, that's the only area that actually comes back further than what's existing now. And that looks like it may be 3 steps currently.
Okay. We'll give another 30 seconds for another question to pop up here, but that was the last one.
Okay. In that case, a few final announcements while we hold to see if there's any final additions. Just a reminder that the holiday party for the Jeffries Point Neighborhood Association will be on Monday, December 11th at the Jeffries Point Yacht Club at 6:30 p.m. That is a half an hour earlier than we normally start. This meeting, the recording, and the results of the vote will be posted on our www.jeffriespoint.org webpage. As always, if you have any questions, have a question about this meeting or any other issues going on in the community, please feel free to reach out to us at board@jeffriespoint.org. We thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we appreciate the care and concern that everyone has for our neighborhood. Andrew, are there any final questions?
No final questions.
Okay, then I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.